Okay, I have a question for you. How many of you could tell me what this is? I didn't. Don't do it. Don't do it. Stop. I'm gonna ask you a question, okay? All right, let's try it again. How many of you can tell me what this is? Okay, now on the count of 3, I want everyone to do it. Are you ready? 1, 2. Not early. On 3, okay? On 3. On the count of 3, I want you to do it, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what was I doing? Well, I'm dabbing. Hey. Okay, all right, we ain't gonna dance. But what does dab have to do with church? And how can we learn from dab? Well, actually, we can learn a lot. See, dab stands for during, after, and before. During, after, and before. See, we can learn a lot from dab because how many of us know that when we go through things or when we're in different situations, that how have we been before it, how we have been during it, and how do we do after that? Well, mix all the letters around, you have during, after, and before. And what we want to talk about today is someone who really could dab. They could dab because during, after, and before they were in a really tough situation, they still had their faith and their trust, and it didn't change. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, for me, during something, after it, and before, unfortunately, I've reacted different. And I've done probably maybe how I shouldn't during, and then after, it's a lot different to look at it, and then before, we all act differently. But how can we learn to be the same and have our trust and our strength during something, after something, and make sure that we have it before? Now, last week we learned about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how we put on some different glasses and how we got a different view of things and how they were able to handle things and how they really had their trust and strength in God. But I'm talking about my guy Dab, otherwise known as Dab Daniel. Dab Daniel is someone who during, after, and before had his faith in God and knew that it was through him. And so I want to talk to you about the book of Daniel, chapter 6. Daniel, chapter 6. All right, so if you have your Bible, make sure that you have your Bible, and we're going to go to the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. And we're talking about Daniel, but today we're calling him Dab Daniel. What does Dab stand for? During, after, and before. Let's get into it. Daniel chapter 6. So here's the thing. Now we talked about, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego last week. And this, what we're talking about, is like a time after that. They believe that Daniel was around 80 years old. And so Daniel has really earned a place of trust and leadership. And the way things that were broken up back then is that you would have a king, and then you'd have people who were underneath him, and then people were underneath that. A little bit different, but right now we have a president, and we have the Senate and the House, and we have governors and mayors and city council and different things like that, where they're put in a position over us. Well, Daniel was one of the top dudes. He was really up there. But there were some other guys in position that didn't like the fact that Daniel was one of those top dudes. And so they were thinking, how can we get Daniel? Because they actually tried, and if you read there in Daniel chapter 6, it talks about how they were looking at, okay, well, maybe he's going to mess up at work. Maybe he's going to do something. We can get him there. They couldn't do it. So they finally said, okay, I got it. We're going to get Daniel. Let's do this. So they go to the king, and they're like, King, hey, do you know that if you make a rule, a law or whatever, that it says that once you make it and you sign off on it, stamp it, that it can't be broken. So if you made a rule that every person's supposed to stand on their feet and hop around and go and make noises like that, well, you have to hop around and make noises and faces like that. It's silly, right? But back then, if that happened, that's what you got to do. Well, they convinced the king that, you know what? Why don't you have this rule? Why don't you have this rule in place that no one should be praying? Let's actually read in Daniel chapter 6. And here we go. and they said this. They said, "King, you should establish a statute or a rule that anyone who makes a petition or prayer to any god or man besides you, king, for 30 days shall be cast into a lion's den."
Ye citizens of Babylon, a decree from King Darius. Anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except to the king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. And so it has been decreed this day.
Now, those people, they were doing that, and they were honestly thinking of Daniel because they knew that he was faithful in what he was doing. See, before things were going on, he was always doing that. He was faithful in how he was doing his job, how he followed the Lord, and he was really, they knew that he was going to follow God and pray. So maybe they can get him that way. Well, what happened? As Daniel would do is he would go and he would pray. And those guys said, oh, Daniel's doing that. So they went to the king and they're like, "Hey, king,
what is the meaning of this outrage?"
We caught Daniel praying to his God, and not to you.
Daniel.
The preparations for the execution have been ordered, my lord.
Daniel is my friend.
A decree set forth by the king, after all, is the law. It cannot be undone.
Then as soon as the king heard this, he was deeply distressed, and he even tried to deliver Daniel. See, even though Daniel and the king didn't have all the exact same beliefs in that, Daniel represented God in his speech, his actions, how he honored people. And that's the thing that we can also learn, is that maybe we don't have to beat people over the head with the Bible, but yet through our actions, the way that we honor people, is that it can speak a lot louder. Let's keep going. Then the king gave the orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. But listen to this. The king spoke and said to Daniel. Now remember, the king and Daniel, they didn't really agree, but Daniel, how he represented himself. So during the time that they're grabbing him and they're going to throw him in there, this is what the king said.
May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you.
Constantly. Constantly does not mean, okay, you're in a bunch of trouble, so like 2 minutes ago, you better be like, "Oh yeah, God, I'm real sorry, oh, help me." No. Constantly serve. And that's before, and now it's during. But then the king woke up in the morning, and he went in, and when he had come close to the den, he cried out with his troubling voice,
Daniel, you were faithful and served your God. Was he able to save you from the lions?
Can you imagine the king going and saying that? Well, what happens? What happens next?
God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you.
See, he was faithful in what he was doing. He was faithful in serving God before and during. Let's see what happens afterwards. So the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken out of the den. So Daniel was taken out of the den, and no injury was found on him because he trusted in his God. Note it doesn't say because he knew special moves and punched the lions in the mouth and he gave them a special food. No. Because he trusted in God. Just like our verse says, God is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. I know that wasn't Daniel who did that. That was God who did that. You can see in verse 25, the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, in every language. Now remember, they just had a rule that says you can't pray or do anything to anybody but the king. And so I make a decree in all of my kingdom. For the God of Daniel, he is the living God, enduring forever. And his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers, he rescues, he performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has also delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Look at the very last verse. So this Daniel enjoyed success in the reign of Darius and the reign of another king. I believe, why did he engage in success, or enjoyed success? Well, it was because he was faithful during, after, and before times. He didn't waver. He didn't be like, oh man, yeah, they're going to think weird of me. Okay, yeah, I know I'm praying to follow God, but I'm not going to do that right now. And yeah, no, I better just do that right now. Or hey, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to sing a song. Hey, I love you, Lord. But when I get home, I'm not going to do that. But, just during church, I will. No, see, we want to be consistent in how we love and follow God, how we can trust God. Our God is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. But it's through Him and through Him alone. So I encourage you all today, don't forget to dab. And tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your grandma, call cousin Ray, tell everybody that your dab, it's a whole different thing. That we can be faithful to God and love God during, after, and before all situations.